Let's learn some Torah. It's Parshat Bo, and in this Parsha we continue the story of our people's liberation. The story of the plagues continues, 7 plagues in last week's Parsha. The final 3 plagues are in this week's Parsha, which makes it incredibly intense, actually. Now, when we read the story, it is very common, in fact, even traditional, to see ourselves ki'ilu yatsami Mitzrayim, as if we emerged ourselves from Egypt. That is the tradition when we have Seder. Every one of us is commanded to see ourselves as if we ourselves were redeemed. The urgency of the story is meant to be felt. But how interesting it is that from all the perspectives that we could choose, we of course choose our ancestors. We look at the Israelites, the oppressed, the underdogs. And that is one of the reasons that we as part of the world, right? We as the Jewish community are called 36 times in the Torah to never oppress the stranger because we know what it was to be oppressed. But from this modern perspective, it's not clear that the perspective that is closest to our own is the one of the Israelites. To be enslaved is a radically different experience than my own life's as I live it. What might this mean? I'm now channeling some teaching from my friend, my teacher, Rabbi Dorothy Richmond, in the Bay Area, in Berkeley, and also serving as a rabbi sometimes in San Francisco. She wrote a beautiful comment on this week's Torah portion for myjewishlearning.com, where she quotes the liberationist theologian Robert McAfee Brown. The book is called Liberation Theology. I want you to hear a different perspective here. Because in this week's Parsha, Pharaoh remains obstinate, once acknowledging that he has done wrong, but being castigated for the first time by his advisors. Consider a person in power in recent global history whose advisors have said you are doing wrong, who really needed to hear that, and who did hear it. I'm not sure who you think of, because there are too many models of leaders who see themselves as powerful and therefore immune to criticism, immune to even advice from their closest people. When their people tell them what they don't want to hear, those people are no longer their people. That's a much more common way to see power exercised in our modern world. And so listen to what Robert Brown says about reading the Parsha with an awareness of privilege. He writes, I have come to the uncomfortable conclusion that most of us who read and write books can be identified as servants in Pharaoh's court. Lower echelon folk who are nevertheless members of the establishment with advancement possibilities if we play our cards right. What is it to be alive today and in the privileged position of choosing to spend time the way we do, blessed by each other's company, learning Torah regularly each day, with a technology that affords us the connectivity, time at our disposal, enough means to have technology at our disposal, and the wealth of Jewish tradition that gives us a perch, which I know makes us uncomfortable with the word privilege because anti Semitism is on the rise, and a Jewish historical consciousness tells you that it has not always been this way. And it hasn't. Who knows if it will remain this way is actually one of the achy feelings in an aware Jewish heart. My children are okay. Poo, poo, poo. We say poo, poo, poo because we ward off the evil eye. At least in my family, we do. Your children are so beautiful. Poo, poo, poo. I'm healthy. Poo, poo, poo. Why the poo, poo, poo? Because I'm trying to keep the bad away. That posture sometimes makes it hard to realize that actually I am okay. And my children do have what they need. And in this moment of Jewish history, as complicated as Israeli politics may be, and they are, there has never been a better time to be a Jew. Which means that I'm actually not closest in perspective to the Israelites who were enslaved in this week's Parsha. I'm actually closer to the advisors in Pharaoh's court, as uncomfortable as that makes me. Listen to how Rabbi Richmond writes in her comment on this week's Parsha. From my seat in the global north, by which she means here, I wonder what it might feel like to identify as an ancient Egyptian, to be afflicted with escalating plagues of environmental destruction and disease, to watch as one's leader, hard-hearted Pharaoh, recklessly and relentlessly refuses to listen to others or change his disastrous course, to be allied with the oppressor instead of the underdog. A commentator, Chizkuni, Rabbi Richman quotes, sees this transfer of goods, where the Israelites, quote, borrow goods as they're about to leave, borrowing knowing they will not return it, and borrowing the goods that they themselves, through their blood, sweat, tears, and lives, created for their oppressors. One commentator, Chizkuni, sees this transfer of goods as the Egyptian people's attempt at economic reparation. They are paying back wages for years of the Israelites' hard slave labor. Ibn Ezra goes further, saying that the Egyptians actually begged the Israelites to borrow their wealth. This is quite miraculous, totally the opposite of the ordinary way of the world. There are conflicting models here of what people in positions of power can do. Pharaoh won't budge. Change is not okay. Eyes open to the vulnerability of what I considered an impenetrable way of life. Stability. Change is dangerous. It is scary. Keep it away. No. Pooh, pooh, pooh. I don't want anything to change. His advisors, however, see what is happening and say, don't you see? Egypt is lost. Why do you continue this way? It must change. Open your heart, Pharaoh. Pharaoh cannot. His life has led him to a posture where his heart is completely encased, completely closed. And before we castigate Pharaoh and say there's no one like him, let's acknowledge that not only are there iconic models in today's political world who might fit the model, but every once in a while we do too. When we are too scared of the world changing and we don't hear the people around us, there are moments where we are pharaonic, like Pharaoh. There are also moments where our hearts crack open just a bit, where we gather up our courage and we see the possibilities of actually accepting some of the changes. It's hard as we age. It's hard as technology changes. It's hard for me when my children challenge me, sometimes correctly. It's hard. It's hard to allow change, to imagine the world different than it is. But given the years that we have come through, friends, the almost 3 years of pandemic, it's important to recognize that actually things have changed and not all of the changes are bad. The cost has been way too high, but look at the possibilities of convening and learning. Look at the possibilities of telemedicine, which increases access. Look at what the use of technology has allowed for those who have always been unable to go to shul or church or school. Think about the creation of Torah and meaning that so many new voices have shared. Think about the egalitarian nature of knowledge, with more voices than ever representing the diversity of our community. Creating Torah, a moment that has exceeded even the transformational power of Yavne after the destruction of the temple. With every destruction that we have experienced as a people, we have pivoted and expanded, recreated ourselves, and emerged better for it. After the destruction of the temple, the rabbis emerged as a new model of democratized learning. After the expulsion from Spain, Kabbalah and Jewish spirituality exploded in Tzfat. After the Shoah, a renewed devotion to our people's depth and life emerged, not only in the new state of Israel, but also in the hearts of all of us who see the phoenix rising with the devotion that all of us bring in the aftermath of so much loss. Globally speaking, not just Jewishly speaking, look at what we are doing in the aftermath of so much loss with the pandemic. Pharaoh never could change. His advisors said, but please, he couldn't. Maybe we can. maybe through the understandings of teachers like Rabbi Dorothy Richman, Chizkuni, Ibn Ezra, and you. Maybe we will emerge stronger, more creative, more alive than ever before. Maybe this is a moment, friends, where we don't have to say poo 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 to the world. We can let in some of that change and be part of our people's ongoing healing. And by our people, maybe even include all people. May we be so blessed as to gather our courage and embrace the world, be alive with it, see ourselves as evolving slowly, cautiously, but with bravery and joy. Here we go. Let's sing our way into a good day, friends. Bless you, friends. See you tomorrow.